Did anybody happen to see this film, Who Killed the Electric Car? A few of you? Okay, we have a few people. Well, at the risk of boring those that have seen the film already, I'm going to show a trailer for the film that will sort of give you an idea of how the film was marketed when it came out. Essentially, look at all those things. Those are some of the different influences I had when we were making the film. I was a original driver of General Motors EV1. And until the EV1 came out, I really didn't know very much about electric cars at all. My experience with electric cars had been when I was very young. The basic experience for us in California was that the state of California decided that they needed to deal with the pollution problems in California. And they mandated to the OEMs, essentially, I guess it's the big six or big seven, Toyota, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, that they had to put electric cars on the road starting in '96. And in the course of this program, over 4,000 cars made it onto the roads. My experience, and this is why we ended up making the film, was that this early technology actually worked very well. And over the course of the battle over the electric car in California, you began to hear very, very many things. I was skeptical personally, and I was driving a Ford Explorer SUV in '96, and I only picked up the EV1 as kind of a test because I was in love with my boyhood hero, Paul McCready, who had done the Gossamer Albatross, and I wanted to try this kind of car out. But the technology, even though lead-acid batteries would only take this car about 60 miles down the road, and you can kind of see it in the right-hand corner here, it turned out that as a commuter vehicle, it worked fine. And the innovation and excitement that came with the introduction of this car went into the political and manufacturing graveyard. In fact, there's less than 400 cars on the road today. So what happened? When we made our film, we looked at a whole bunch of what became suspects. And you see the list here: the auto companies, the oil industry, the federal and state governments, consumers, batteries, environmental groups. All of these groups played a role in at first starting the electric car movement, and then later getting in the way of it and stopping it. It's very interesting for me because when we made the film, we were fairly antagonistic with all these players. But as we got deeper into the story, we realized that every one of these forces had a role in getting change started, and then once change started getting in the way. So I wanted just to make this point at this conference because we're at the eve, or maybe the dawn, of an incredibly new age where the circumstances have changed a little bit. But once again, I think we'll see how all these forces will at the same time be pushing forward for change and then maybe getting in the way of change. And hopefully with the momentum of the brilliant people here and the momentum of higher oil prices and the truth of global warming, that this will make us more effective change makers. So there's the first electric car I ever saw, from the 1900s, of course, and other direction would be good. There's the next electric car I saw. This is actually General Motors helped design this electric car, and it leads to the joke that there's more planets that have electric cars in the solar system than any other kind of car. So we have electric vehicles on the moon, and we have electric cars on Mars, and of course here on Earth. Most kids have introductions to electric cars through toys. It's very funny here because you'll see this metaphor even today when car companies will put the image of a gasoline filling station on the dashboard of an EV to fill the car with electricity, as it were. So here we were in Los Angeles in 1990. California said, we have 1 out of 4 kids with childhood asthma. We must get the pollution out of the cities. So they mandated electric cars. There's Dr. McCready, whose work brought us the solar-powered airplane and the bicycle-powered airplane. I think, did Mr. Picard mention McCready? I think he did in his presentation. So a true innovator. And the electric car was pronounced to possibly deal with these problems of pollution. General Motors had a big introduction in '96. All the other car companies did as well. GM got a lot of credit because their car was a ground-up EV1, and Dr. McCready worked on it along with Alan Cocconi and a lot of people in Pasadena and really all over the country. And there's my electric car on a trip to Yosemite. The advantages, as we've heard so much about at the conference, there's lots of advantages to electric cars. And there's not limited to the global warming factors, which we've also discussed here, so I won't go through this again. But the big payoff for the state was potentially that we're moving pollution away, and it's easier to regulate pollution when you have power plants responsible for pollution and tailpipes. So armed with this momentum, I think a lot of us EV drivers, and there were hundreds of us in California, when the car companies convinced the state of California that the electric car was not sustainable, we all became activists. And that's, I guess, how I got the environmental activist moniker. And we thought, well, how can we get our electric cars back after they had been repossessed? Because we weren't allowed to own them at the time. So we staged an electric car funeral. And that's not an electric hearse, that's actually a gasoline-powered hearse, but those were the last cars before they were destroyed. And we pulled together our activists, we had lots of protests, and Chelsea Sexton helped start Plug-in America, and Felix Kramer was involved. Many people tried to slow down this whole process. We had protests in California, and then on one unfortunate day, just before Christmas in 2003, I guess it was, or maybe 2004, we went out to Arizona in a helicopter, and we had gotten a tip that the car companies, in this case General Motors, were actually destroying their first generation electric cars in the desert. So we got these pictures, and that really became an anchor for the film, that the hope of the 21st century was being destroyed prematurely.